software developer side, you have like HackerRank, Codility. There's not an equivalent tool for cybersecurity hiring. I felt that consistent pain point at the hiring phase was something I could zero in on, just because like everybody to a T talked about it. To find the best talent, we need to look at what matters. And everybody who spent time in the real world knows that, like, you know, what college you graduated from, who you know, even what previous jobs you had are not reliable indicators of talent. Just go to the tape. Let's look at what really matters. A body of information that's an input into your bigger process of decision making, right? Yes. Companies are trying to create a culture, and that ultimately is probably the holistic thing at what matters. Are you a company that cares about pedigree, or are you a company that cares about performance? Your filtering process early on has overrated people and underrated people because you've only looked at resumes, right?
Yes.
Instead of it doing at this point, we're offering the ability to flip that and do it at the beginning. Parents got us a Commodore 64 when I was a kid.
Right. Now, let's go into that. I want to go with this. So the Commodore 64, did it have a keyboard?
Yes.
Yeah, but what kind of disk drive? Like
it had the floppy to start.
Like a 5.5.
Yeah, the big one.
The big floppy, like the real floppy.
Yeah.
And then they named the hard floppy, but it wasn't floppy.
Yeah.
3.5.
Right.
But we're in a 5.5.
Early high school, I did like bulletin boards. If folks,
yes.
That's not like.
Let's talk about.
It's like pre-internet, I guess.
Let's talk. Wait. Let's talk about BBSs. So now, did you actually take your phone?
Yeah. And it makes it sound like I'm some like cool hacker kid. Not at all. It's like literally, oh, let me visit this bulletin board about like the NBA or, nonsense like that. It's not like I was doing anything. But yeah, it's just cool stuff, back then.
So wait, you took your phone.
Yeah.
Right? You put it on the modem and it makes that weird noise.
Yeah.
A curious teenager that studies were obviously of extreme importance to you, and that was sort of instilled externally to you from your parents.
Yeah. That's understating it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the summer after my senior year in high school, I volunteered for the governor's campaign in Michigan for one of the candidates. And so that's probably tough on us with school, but also encouraged us a ton to just do stuff. My local congressman's re-election campaign really occurred to me I could live outside Michigan so I'm just like, all right, I'm gonna be an engineer between trying to do something quite practical like be an engineer.
Yep.
Versus, I guess I had all these interests in social justice and politics and all these other things. Felt like there was more out there to explore. I was like, I'm just gonna take the LSAT and go to law school. Took out loans to go to law school. Worked at the DOJ Civil Rights Division, NAACP Legal Defense Fund. Went to work at the Asian American Legal Defense Fund. Immigrants' rights cases, workers' rights cases.
So 5 years there, and then what happens?
So I ended up wanting to go beyond. I loved being a lawyer, but I just started feeling that filing lawsuits was going to end up limiting. And that led me into my opportunity in the Obama administration in 2013.
Did somebody approach you?
No, I just was so excited about Barack Obama, and so many people, and just was I want to be involved with that. I want to contribute, working on higher education policy, workforce training, that sort of thing. The main things I worked on was bringing accountability to for-profit colleges that are sort of really preying on low-income people and people of color with very low quality sort of education, but very high cost and debt. For the last 2 years of administration, I was in the White House as a policy advisor, working on a range of things. It was the best thing I've ever been a part of. Entrepreneur in residence, fake title kind of things. And
there's a lot, it's such an interesting work.
It was a chance for me to learn about the things that they were doing and to explore ideas of what could I do with those kinds of technologies.
So what ideas did you explore, and what conclusions did you come to?
Started investing in the cybersecurity space just as sort of, the space is growing, it's high demand, there's opportunities there, and every sort of chief security officer I interviewed, they were identifying all these sort of problems, finding the people that they need. You have to spend a lot of time on it. A lot of money goes into it. It's hard to figure out who's good and who's not. If you get it wrong, there's a lot of cost.
So cybersecurity.
Diversity is a massive problem. It's all dudes that look like me or you, right? Sort of talent and skills.
Thanks for the poop push.
Yeah, it's a New York skill, right?
It's a New York skill.
Sort of speaks to the idea of like assessment, right? Like I need to know what it is that makes someone great at something. So in this case, a cybersecurity job, right? That the way to find the most talented people is to look at what they can do and how they think rather than just what their resumes say.
Exactly.
And so we've built a hands-on sort of simulation-based assessment for cybersecurity hiring so that the hiring process at companies can be driven by those things that matter rather than resumes. Because if you have a technology that can sort of automate that evaluation, we can do that at the beginning of the process. So think of like for software jobs, like a coding test, something like that. Not the same thing, but you apply for a job, here, do this, let me see what you're all about.
So is it like 100% real environment?
Yeah. One of our core product principles is that it should be as close to real life as possible, right? You're asked to, all right, inspect these machines, these computers on this network and see if there's any vulnerabilities. That is exactly the kind of thing you would do in the workplace, and you're looking for if there's malware or other issues. And so yes, the idea is like, let's give you realistic scenarios and work on it, and then we look at what you did, write up an evaluation report for our customer. And the idea is that is a body of information that they can use now to make a decision. So all these people applied for the job. Instead of just looking at your resume, I'm like, oh, well, I'm not sure what the resume tells me, but like this person did this on this kind of exercise. That tells me something.
Exactly.
Because Team 5 has taken, a bunch of stuff off your plate on the hard skills side. You can spend less time on that and more time on the other things that matter.
Entrepreneur.
Oh, I mean, so, with a kind of law, policy, government, that kind of background, I mean, everything is new. Every step is like a whole set of learning, and then try stuff, fail, learn more. So learning like a whole new set of things, like knowledge, skills, whatever. So that's one. Number two, super humbling. Definitely the hardest thing I've ever worked on. And again, we're at the beginning, so we haven't figured anything out, right? That's number two. Number three, I think, there's this really real aspect to it, because we're at this first step of all right, pilots. The first time we have to see is someone willing to pay for this. And I've never really had to work on something that real.
Yes.
Right? Most other jobs, it's all right, you get in a seat because I didn't figure it out. You know? So that is a whole new feeling.
Indeed.
I will say when people talk about the pain, I sort of now am, it's we are a broke startup trying to get to a different place, So.
Well, I think that's a great position to be in because you're lean, mean, and hungry. Welcome to Startup Hunter. I am here with Tushar, Sheth of Go Team 5, and they say that pedigree does not equal performance. So what does that mean? Think cybersecurity, think young hackers who are misguided, who don't have a job but have all these amazing skills and don't really know a productive way to channel their skills. So you go Team 5, you take their crazy hacker test, and they will evaluate you as a candidate. And the wind is really going bad right now, but it's okay because I have my Fluffy. But they will evaluate you as a candidate and get you placed in a job. Is that more or less correct? Yes or no? Yes or no?
Not exactly, no.
Okay, we are going to, okay, then if it's no, how is it not right?
So our customer are companies who are doing the hiring, right? So if someone applies for a job to a company, the company will ask them to work on one of the evaluation, sort of hands-on evaluation scenarios that we've built.
Yeah.
And then we evaluate the candidate based on what they can do, trying to get a sense of how they think about the subject matter, and then give a report to the employer. And the idea is that is a better that is an important input into deciding which candidates should make it further into their process and ultimately get selected, rather than starting with credentials on paper, a resume.
Got it. So, Mr. Sheth.
Yep.
On this show, before we even get into Go Team 5,
right,
I actually am interested in you.
Okay.
So the first half of the show, we're just gonna do your history of entrepreneurship from birth. So
that part will be short.
What I want to know, I'm gonna dig. I'm a very good information hunter. Where were you born? It's double parter, and what did your parents do?
So I was born, my parents lived in Chicago at the time, so I was born in Chicago. My dad was a mechanical engineer. He's retired now. My mom was a med tech in a lab and hospital.
Yeah,
she's
on the sunny side.
Yeah, she's the person who does, blood tests and all that kind of stuff.
So were either of your parents entrepreneurial?
Not really.
Yeah.
Although our culture, I'm Indian and specifically Gujarati, and a lot of, I guess culturally, Gujaratis are a lot of entrepreneurs. And my dad, both parents' families, like in India, I think, had business, but no, not particularly. I think my dad tried to do little things here and there growing up, but mostly they were working at companies and hospitals, as I said.
Got it. So that's your parents. Now, what I want to know is, what's the first hustle that you can remember doing? And the younger, the better.
The first hustle.
You could be, in the sandbox, selling rocks you found on the ground. I don't know, something. I'm digging for something. We're selling lemonade, selling chocolate bars on the Chicago subway, something.
I'll be honest, I never did any of that.
Money didn't have to change hands, even. Something where and let me take it from a different angle. What's something where you were a kid and you were taking initiative that nobody told you to do, yet you were doing something productive?
I loved basketball. I'd be outside in our driveway just shooting baskets all the time.
Yeah.
Studying. I would say, I will say that I was, pretty involved with like computers and all that kind of stuff.
Now we're talking. Now,
although I wouldn't consider myself like a hacker kid or anything, but my dad, my parents got us a Commodore 64 when I was a kid.
Right. Now let's go into that. I want to go with this. So the Commodore 64, did it have a keyboard?
Yes.
Yeah, but what kind of disk drive? Like
it had the floppy to start.
Like a 5.5.
Yeah, the big one.
The big floppy, like the real floppy.
Yeah.
And then they named the hard floppy, but it wasn't floppy.
Yeah.
3.5.
Right.
But we're in a 5.5. Now, was it DOS on there? I had never had the Commodore.
No, it's no, Commodore 64 would not be DOS. I think it had its own OS.
And was it a graphical interface or strictly text?
No, this is like, at the command prompt, you're like doing stuff.
So here you are, 6 years old, 7 years old?
Maybe a little older than that, but not much, yeah.
And did you do little calculations on it?
Yeah, 10 go to 20 print. The Detroit Pistons are the best.
That's
nonsense like that.
This is what I'm looking for. Because
I don't think that's like every kid. If you were lucky enough, like me, and your parents got you a computer, so I will say that that's certainly an indication of having that kind of sort of privilege and resources. But if you did, I think, I did the basic stuff. I remember we got the computer, I think one Christmas, and then I think we hooked up like a little TV to it as the screen.
Yeah.
And then not knowing anything at the time, you could just push shift or control and get different characters. So at first I thought that's what programming, you're just writing all this nonsense on the screen. Then you sort of all right, basic, I guess, the 10 print this or whatever.
Right, so you're already starting to learn some of the fun. No, see, you're taking it for granted. Not every kid that has a computer learns programming. So I think that's really...
I will say, I didn't like go deep into it really.
I know you didn't go deep.
I guess when I got junior high, early high school, I did like bulletin boards. If folks,
Yes.
that's not like.
Let's talk about
It's
this.
like pre-internet, I guess.
Let's talk. Wait. Let's talk about BBSs. So now, did you actually take your phone?
Yeah.
And like you put your phone onto a modem?
Yeah.
No, so let's talk about this, because a lot of people who are watching this show don't even we're not old enough. They don't know what this was. So let's like go into the history of the internet here.
Yeah, I mean, I should caveat all this. Like, it makes it sound like I'm some like cool hacker kid. Not at all. It's like literally, oh, let me visit this bulletin board about like the NBA or, nonsense like that. It's not like I was doing anything. But yeah, it's just cool stuff, back then.
So wait, you took your phone.
Yeah.
Right? You put it on the modem and it makes that weird noise.
Yeah. I don't even know how I found out about it or how you even figure out what to call.
Right.
I have no recollection of how or who showed. Someone showed me.
Your dad didn't tell you.
It must have been some like family friend kid who was older and was like, dude, this is cool. Then you can like go look up like crazy stuff like, how to like put a nitrous injection thing on your car to make it go like super fast.
Yeah.
Like, who knows if any of that stuff was real, but like, there's like just nonsense stuff like that when you're like a kid, it's cool,
But people don't understand that back then the internet didn't exist.
Yeah, I mean, this was kind of like some precursor, I guess, yeah.
And before the internet, existed as we know it today, there weren't even web browsers, right? Netscape didn't exist at this point. It was
No,
literally.
I mean, this is not a totally different like protocol and everything. This is not even on the actual internet, right? This is just someone set up something on their computer at home, and I'm literally just dialing into it. I think.
Yeah, right? I mean, whether we don't actually know where it was, but it was likely located in somebody's home.
Yeah.
And there were like 300 people dialing into this particular bulletin board. What did you by a phone number probably?
Yeah, I don't know how I think maybe once you dial into some, then you get these lists. And a lot of them were interest oriented. So if you're into this one thing, then, someone's into that and they have a bunch of stuff. And
there are literally books and, pages on Wikipedia about the early history of the internet. And basically this central bulletin board server that you were on was sort of like the Yahoo directory of the bulletin board servers.
Yeah, I wonder. I don't have any. Yeah, something like that.
So I just think it's fascinating, that like little kids or even teenagers, they, and just like you followed your curiosity and you discovered some very interesting information, in an era before the internet existed. So I think this desire, and to go even further back, this desire for people to just have information organized, in an easy to access way. It existed before the internet. There used to be these things there was this service in Europe. I don't remember the name, but it was literally like a physical internet. And it existed in like the 1800s for very rich people. So like you owned a company here in New York and you needed some information on something. You would like put a request into this information kind of physical internet, physical search engine basically. And they would like get back to you in a week with, information.
It is interesting. I often joke with my buddies from college. I'm like, how do we ever just like get in touch and hang out and make plans? Like, how do we find anything? It's like, even for all of us who were like, old enough to like have like our childhood was in the pre-internet era. Like it's all blurry now. I could remember my dad looking in the phone book for everything any new thing you had to do, phone book, open up the phone book, blah, blah, blah.
I mean, people don't even understand that there was two different kinds of phone books. There was yellow pages and white pages. And yellow pages were for commercial and white pages were for residential.
And I mean, these are the things I will say that, now that I have kids and the memories that all come like floating back, like, just, now it's easier to find info, right? But like growing up in the 80s, 90s kid, right? Like my parents are immigrants from India. They didn't experience all these things that I got to experience as a kid. So when my dad sees me like playing soccer, like literally every day in the backyard, like, it's crazy me thinking about, he just like on his own was like, all right, I got to get Tushar into soccer, like a league or something. And then who knows? It's not like they had all these, like, he probably asked somebody at work, and then came back with like, oh, there's this thing, AYSO. And it makes, it's just like, makes me so appreciative of like the efforts that they're like, all right, we didn't grow up in this culture. We didn't do any of this stuff. My parents both grew up in like, very middle-class families in India, which at that time in India meant like you don't have a lot. And it's crazy that they went to such efforts to make sure we did like everything under the sun. Now it would be a little easier. You would just like, everyone would go on Google, like, all right, soccer, Michigan, whatever, and you figure it out. So it's, in that way, it's really relevant to like what, like, I remember my parents doing to just getting information. Sure. We live in a different world,
Yeah, we totally live in a different world. But I think also a lot of things are very much the same. So we really, established that you were a curious teenager, that studies were obviously of extreme importance to you, and that was sort of instilled externally to you from your parents.
That's understating it. Yeah.
Yeah, I would. So
I'll add one more thing. So, so again, like, I was into sports, guess that, to some level into like tech and computer. So, but I think even junior high, especially high school, like, I definitely had a massive curiosity about just like politics, the kind of social issues in the world. I mean, I don't know that I was like necessarily acting on them very much, just because I was like a dumb dude in high school. But like, so the summer after my senior year in high school, I volunteered for the governor's campaign in Michigan for one of the candidates. And so like, that's probably the other thing that I probably, other than, the other nonsense but that probably definitely is, I don't know why it took me until I was like 17 to actually go volunteer, but like, that was something of like, I think I always had like some level of interest. I'd be reading stuff. My dad got Newsweek and Time and all that. So I would read all that, and then, was definitely interested in like, kind of like the world and the country and what's going on in it.
Yeah. So, I mean, right there already, we're seeing this kind of tendency to take initiative. Like, you didn't do the campaign for the money. I'm sure there was a small...
No, this is all volunteer stuff.
Or free.
Yeah.
So clearly, there's this fundamental urge to just take initiative.
And all of that, we have to like kind of concede, like that's all a result of, my parents giving us so much opportunity that like I didn't have to like get a job the summer before I went to college. I could like work for free on a campaign. I mean, I'm sure there's lots of kids who would want to do stuff like that, just didn't have the opportunity.
Indeed,
so
the guy who I literally interviewed yesterday was working all throughout high school and college.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to see. Yeah, I was curious. I'm sure every kid's curious, but I also had the like opportunity and the luxury to do it. I mean, it's kind of insane when I think about like, what the fuck was I doing every summer, just sitting around like pursuing curiosities? Like, that's so lame when you, like, what a fucking douchey thing to be able to do, right? But I feel very lucky and grateful that, my parents sort of, they were tough on us with school, but also encouraged us a ton to just do stuff.
Did you work for the campaign for just one summer?
That particular campaign, but I did that over and over the years, in college, after college.
Now talk about this. You did the governor campaign first, and what was the next campaign you worked on?
So I think halfway through college, one summer I worked on my local congressman's re-election campaign.
Okay, so you did congressman, and in what capacity were you working?
These are just more like volunteer-y, kind of phone banking, helping to do events, like really low-level stuff. They weren't like formal jobs ever until like after college is probably the first like formalized thing I did, but like,
So before
or after law school even.
Before we even get there, I want to know, what did you study in college?
So I was electrical engineering student at Michigan. Go Blue. So I had this like tension, right? Like on the one hand, I was like a Midwestern kid. My dad's an engineer. It's just like, it's hard to like sort of describe to folks who grew up on the coast, like even in Michigan, even with all the like I've said, the luxuries and privileges of a great middle class life, just scope wise, they had no idea. Like it didn't even really occur to me I could like live outside Michigan, or so I'm just like, all right, I'm gonna be an engineer.
Hold on a second.
So I was studying electrical engineering at Michigan, and largely because like it just seemed like a good thing to do. My dad's an engineer. I didn't really I didn't have any other ideas of things to study.
Yeah.
And so I think I always had this like tension between trying to do something quite practical, like be an engineer.
Yep.
Versus, I guess I had all these interests in social justice and politics and all these other things. And
so did you actually get your, watch out for the poop.
Yeah.
Did you actually get your engineering degree?
Oh yeah.
So you went at least undergraduate, and then but you're a lawyer. So how did you get into law school? Like how did that happen?
Basically, my third summer of college, I worked as an intern at General Motors, 10 miles from where I grew up. And it was cool and all. I got to work on the Corvette. It was great. But I kind of just was like, is this what I'm gonna be, what I'm gonna do right now? And I just felt like there was more out there to explore.
So you something inside your gut said, I probably can't do this for the rest of, we're good.
Well, I'll say a couple. So, yeah.
And your gut probably said, I can't.
At that time, right?
I don't see myself doing this for the rest of my life.
And I will say, this is also probably a reflection of how probably immature I was or not thoughtful. But I think at that time, so this is like late 90s now, right? So at that time, at least on the West Coast, the internet stuff is all blowing up.
Right.
And I bet you if you were an engineering student at any college, at least on the West Coast, you're talking about all these like amazing things.
Wait, how old are you?
So I'm 43.
Okay, so you're 5 years older than me. Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
So
I was in the dot-com boom too, but it was slightly different.
Yeah, so I'm college 98, right? So right when it's all going down, but in the Midwest, it wasn't like the time. I mean, I'm sure maybe under more aware, smarter, kind of mature folks, but like for me, I did not make the connection at that time to that you can do the technology and ideas about social justice and the world are not mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
Now I get the engineering magazine every month from Michigan, and kids are going to like Africa or India and helping do projects in villages, and they're engineering students, right? Or whatever. I mean, that's like, just an example. But if someone had made that connection for me, or if I was, just aware enough to do that, I think maybe I would have stuck with it, but I didn't see that. And then I was looking around and it just felt like everyone who I had read about or who comes to campus, who's doing exciting things in the world, they're all lawyers. And so I was like, I'm just gonna take the LSAT and go to law school.
Now, did you have to work to pay for law school, or did your parents take care of that?
So I took out loans to go to law school.
Got it.
My parents took care of college.
And they probably were not in favor of you going to law school.
Well, they're never not supportive, but it was like such a foreign concept to them, you know.
And they were like, engineer. Because my dad's the same way.
Okay,
he was like,
yeah.
we have a real parallel there, because I think I would have made a great lawyer, right?
You would have been a great lawyer, yeah.
But it just was foreign. It was foreign to my father to say be a lawyer.
Yeah, I mean, at that time, Indian kids coming from kind of a middle class sort of thing like doctors or engineers. That's really was the scope.
Yeah.
Finance maybe was kind of a thing, obviously. I think, there were lawyers who were Indian, I'm sure, but like we didn't know any, like we had no family friends. There was no one like point to that, oh, you could do this.
Right.
Maybe one or two people. So, it was like a unique concept for them. And, at that time it was like crazy job market. The economy was booming.
Right, the .com thing was.
Yeah, it was like kind of insane, which had crazy repercussions in law school as well. But like, because salaries just started going up because.
And it just makes you jealous. Like, why am I locked in this classroom when all these people are making all this money?
Well, I was totally oblivious to all that because I went straight through. I stayed at Michigan for law school, so like, kind of like didn't really, I wasn't into it. I was into this whole other thing.
Yeah.
That's so I got back to college my senior year and was just like, I'm gonna take the LSAT, apply to law school. I was lucky enough to get in, and I just like the next year I'm like in law school. Like, it's sort of like this, didn't even take time off, like, backpack Europe during the summer like everyone does after college.
Who has money?
Yeah, exactly. Again, these are all underlying all this is being lucky in life and my parents just giving every opportunity in the world, and just like who gets to sit around just like, oh, I guess I'll just not be an engineer. I'll just go to law school. Like on a whim, so like ridiculous when you think about these things.
But I think you're right in that your gut was telling you, I shouldn't be an engineer. If your gut wasn't telling you that, then you probably wouldn't have thought it was a good idea.
No, I think I had to do it. Like I had to like explore, you just.
And now you have no regrets.
No, I don't feel like, not that I feel like, oh, I figured it out. I'm doing, like, I will say I'm having a lot of fun doing what I'm doing right now, but it does feel like it's just like that stuff never goes away, where you're just like always trying to figure out, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Am I achieving enough?
Sure,
blah, blah, blah.
Sure. So, law school's 2 years?
3.
3 years. Now, did you do it? What I want to know, did you work on more campaigns while you were in law school?
I did not. The next time I worked, so in 2004, so I finished law school in 01.
Yeah, just say that.
Yeah, I finished law school in 01, came to New York to, work at one of the big law firms like everyone does after law school. Also, it was a great experience, to be honest, but again, like I went to law school because I had all these like social justice interests, but then, just kind of like did the normal thing instead of going straight into that kind of work. Partly because I just wanted to experience all the different things there were to experience.
Like such as?
It's just like, working at a law firm, kind of being a litigator at a, big place. I worked at this place, Simpson Thatcher here.
Wait, you're going way too fast for me.
Yeah.
I thought we were still in law school.
Okay, we're in law school.
So did you do internships in law school?
Yes. So the first summer I was in Washington, D.C.
Now with a private firm, public?
No, I worked at the DOJ Civil Rights Division, and I split between that and the NAACP Legal Defense Fund.
National Association for the Advancement of Colored Peoples.
Correct. So like for me, that's the original legendary lawyers like Thurgood Marshall and that crew, right?
Where you put that crew, that is the legendary Roots crew, and
those are like anyone who's ever wanted to do like civil rights stuff, which is I would say a lot of people.
Yeah.
Like those are the original. There's a book about them called Crusaders in the Court. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, they changed the world, along with all the movement and organizing and advocacy that was being done at that time. But they really, so if you're a lawyer and you're interested in that stuff, I mean, that's like epic to be able to have a chance to
work at the NAACP.
Yeah.
So that was year 1 in Washington. Year 2, summer internships, year 2 of law school.
Where I ended up working after Simpson Thatcher.
So you interned right here in the city.
Yeah.
Now, Simpson Thatcher, are you working on like just straight money, corporate litigation? Like what kind of stuff were you doing there?
Yeah, just corporate litigation. Although I will say, like, well, we can get to what it was like after law school, but they're very supportive of pro bono work.
Yeah. So even though they're a hardcore, strictly business, 30 lawyers on one corporation versus 30 lawyers at the other corporation, trying to bury each other in paperwork.
That's basically what it is.
Typical pre-AI law tactics. Even though you're making big money here, or they're making big money, there was still some kind of pro bono aspect, which they didn't have to do at all. They could have just made their money, loved their money, and had nothing to do with pro bono work.
I mean, I would say it's not atypical, but they were like, I never got told no working on something. You could add it to your billable hours as if it was any other thing you're working on.
Which they didn't have to do. They could have just said,
I mean, it doesn't make any difference.
You're not making us any money,
Well,
so...
It doesn't make any difference, but like, there's like, everyone's thinking about like what hours you have for the year, all that. I mean, not that much, but like, there's no bottom line to those hours, but like, I mean, it never felt, as long as you were doing other stuff. Now, I don't think you can like, I mean, I have no idea, but I would have never said no to the corporate stuff. Like, I mean, that was my rule, like, never say no. You just do what needs to be done. But, so I think but I was that guy sort of like, I would say 20% of my time was probably like doing, pro bono stuff, but that's 20% of like working, a lot of hours. And honestly, so it's an awesome way to learn.
You were working 168 hours a week.
No, it wasn't that crazy. Lawyers love to exaggerate how much they work. It was, I was like a young single guy. I probably worked till like 9 o'clock every day, like, half the weekend or something. And then sometimes it's crazy and you're working all the time, but it wasn't like as bad as some might make it sound.
Now, how long did you actually work at the firm?
So that was 3 years. And that's because I was like, I gotta go do the things I'm interested in doing.
Yeah.
And I wasn't really, I was very grateful for that opportunity. I learned a ton, but it wasn't, I wasn't like the most serious, like, I would not call myself a rising star at Simpson Thacher. Let's put it that way.
So okay.
I'm sure I was fine, but like, that was not what I was wanting to do in the world.
So what did you want to do?
So I wanted to work on civil rights stuff, right? So I went to work at the Asian American Legal Defense Fund.
Okay.
The Asian American Legal Defense Fund. So it's modeled after the NAACP-LDF, and so it's a civil rights organization that's focused on the Asian American community.
Yeah.
And so there I was litigating immigrants' rights cases, workers' rights cases. I had a fellowship from the Open Society Institute to sort of go work there.
Yeah.
And that was like kind of, I'm like doing all this stuff I started thinking about way back in college. And if you're like South Asian, Asian American, like you look at all deaf when you're young as this
talk
place.
About what you feel was the single most challenging and important thing that you did at the Asian Legal Defense Fund.
So I worked on a range of cases. I will say, like, just in general, civil rights work and the people who continue to do that, I have a lot of respect for it. Just it's like you're always in an uphill battle. But I'll say, you can't avoid the politics of anything. If you're doing civil rights stuff, it's inherently political.
Exactly.
So I'll just give a flavor of the kind of like, there's, tens of thousands of workers here in the city and around the, in cities across the country that like, maybe more than tens of thousands, just, they're in really low paying jobs. They're not getting paid minimum wage. They're not getting paid overtime. They're working like really difficult work, like restaurant work and construction, all these kind of things. So a lot of my cases were just representing groups of workers like that and going after their employers for the money that was owed to them.
So how long were you at the Asian Legal Defense?
5 years.
Wow. So did you become their chief counselor?
No, I was just a lawyer there.
But still.
It's a small organization. There's not like, you just do your work.
So 5 years there, and then what happens?
So I ended up wanting to like go beyond. I loved being a lawyer, but I just started feeling that filing lawsuits was going to end up limiting, and
so there's that entrepreneurial spirit right there, which is like you could do this for the rest of your life, have a comfortable life. It would be stable and comfortable. But here you are not being satisfied.
Well, yeah, I just kind of wanted to work on the same stuff, maybe a little bit at bigger scale. I ended up going to a kind of like more entrepreneurial anti-poverty organization, and then that led me into my opportunity in the Obama administration in 2013.
Now, what did you start? Did somebody approach you?
No, I just was like so excited about Barack Obama, and like so many people, and just was like, I want to be involved with that. I want to contribute. I want to be a part of it. And I just, started connecting with people and talking to people, and through, just supportive, like friends, colleagues, classmates, whoever, just eventually you just get the right intros and they become meeting.
You made that happen. And what job did you take?
So I at first was a political appointee at the Department of Education, working on higher education policy, workforce training, that sort of thing. So I worked on that for 2 years. One of the main things I worked on was bringing accountability to for-profit colleges that are sort of really preying on low-income people and people of color with very low quality sort of education, but very high cost and debt. So there was a big policy effort to sort of say, colleges like this are going to be held accountable for their outcomes of students. Otherwise, you can't get federal government money, right? So 90% of their revenue comes from like Pell Grants, student loans, all money that originates from the federal government. And so that's how these places make money. And so we kind of said, well, if you're not delivering results for students, and you consistently fail to do that, then you cannot have access to this money.
So, and this is a hard question, but was it successful?
It was. So it happened. We put regulations in place. It started to bring about change and kind of shut down really, really bad programs. It's had some impact, but it's been hasn't had a chance to play out.
Okay. So was that all you did? And I don't mean to belittle the work you did for the country, but what I'm really trying to ask is, were there other things you did at the administration, or did you only work on that?
No, I worked on a bunch of other higher ed workforce training policy, and then for the last 2 years of administration, I was in the White House as a policy advisor, working on a range of things in the Vice President's office. And there I worked on a broader set of things, including higher ed and workforce training, but also labor, the economy, competition in the economy, a bunch of policy areas.
Interesting. So...
And something I'm very grateful and lucky to have been a part of. Okay,
so 2016 election happens, you no longer have a job.
Yeah, I mean, so those kind of jobs, it was ending anyways in 2017, January.
Yeah.
In a political job, you're there as long as the
boss.
Yeah. I guess the technical phrase is you serve at the pleasure of the president. So that was ending no matter what. My wife was here the whole time in New York, so I was coming back every weekend. So I was never gonna stick around anyways. But it was, a gutting sort of way to go out, I will say.
So here you are, unemployed. And what'd you do?
I was cashed. So my daughter was born in February 2017. So I took about a year off just to
parental leave.
Just to rest and spend time with, who gets a chance to have a break when your kid's born?
Alexis Ohanian.
Yeah, so if you're not as big time as Alexis Ohanian, most people don't get that chance.
Well, he's a big advocate of paternity leave.
Yeah, well, my wife's a cool person and very supportive, and sort of was lucky enough to take some time off and really sort of, clear my head, and also just had this awesome experience spending a lot of time with my daughter,
Okay, so you sort of decompressed,
Yeah.
right? Because you've been on a kind of roller coaster, ever increasing responsibility, an extremely global and high impact, position. I think decompression is actually great.
Yeah.
You had a kid to take care of.
I should add, though, I don't want to overstate. I mean, there's tons of policy people in the administration. It's not like I was some, big time person, but we all had our role and responsibilities, and we're there to try to make stuff happen. And I think I was a part of it, but I don't want to make it seem like, I'm some
mucky muck.
But I'm very, it was awesome. It was like the best thing I've ever been a part of.
I love it, and thank you. So I was leading up to you're here taking care of your daughter for a year, and what was the next move after that?
Well, I just started thinking about what do I want to do next, and nothing was going to be as exciting as being able to go into the White House every day. But I kind of wanted, something to be kind of pumped about and excited about. And when I was in the administration, because I worked on higher ed and workforce training, obviously one of the things we're spending a lot of time thinking about, which a lot of people are, just there's just tens of millions of people in the country that just need better opportunities in their career to advance, right? It's a real problem in the country.
Well, here's the thing. You've got automation. Automation's taking jobs. You have globalization taking jobs. So there's this middle class in this country, that for 50, 60, 70 years just didn't have to worry about that. And now there's just these fundamental forces, there just isn't the same amount of work here that there used to be, for the same percentage of the population.
So I'll say, I think some of what you said I agree with. I will say I think the automation thing I think is overstated. I don't think, it's a choice how we're gonna treat people and workers, right? It's a policy choice. It's how much we value what people do and what opportunities we give them. I think the globalization and trade piece is real and has had significant impacts. But automation isn't the reason we choose to have a minimum wage at $7, right? I mean, so there's things we can do and choices we can make about what work is worth and what value people have and what chance if we're gonna create an economy that requires all these different skills and credentials and all this, then we should give people an opportunity to get those things. It's not fair to create a whole structure and then sort of say, all right, but now you're on your own, so the folks that are lucky like me can sort of thrive and the others can't. These are choices, these are policy choices. There's no force out of our control that's keeping people struggling in the wealthiest country that's ever been known to man, right? So.
It's a very profound answer. But I'm just trying to sort of establish that.
Yes.
That there are these forces at play. And there's a lot of people that don't have great jobs.
People are getting left out, and I 100% agree with that.
But I don't believe that, I just think that the free market and that innovators, can create these opportunities. And again, I don't
absolutely.
I don't want to get into a whole debate of free market versus government.
No, we don't have to have that argument to talk about that. I agree that we live in a capitalist approach, and there's always going to be a chance to create, right? I think whether everyone has that chance, different question, but yes, correct, of course.
So watch out for that. So we sort of understand your mental framework,
right?
But
so
you're unemployed, and I want to know, what was the first thing you did, why aren't you working at a law firm? Why are you starting a company, and what does this company do? And talk about the formation of Grow Team 5.
So
and it's okay if you did something else, because I want to know the story in a concise manner.
Yeah, I started just trying to just I'd always been brainstorming ideas, started thinking about, and one thing that always stayed with me from my experience, tech by itself can't solve a problem, but tech can play an important role. And with a problem like this that's on the order of tens of millions or more, tech will have to play a role, right? Because we need solutions at scale. And so, in that job, like everyone wants to come and show you their awesome training thing and this, that, and the other. And, very cool stuff going on in the world. People are trying very cool things, as you said, creators and all. But I didn't see things that felt like they were gonna make big impacts, like double, triple, quadruple success for people. Meanwhile, the military had spent a lot of time investing in research and technology for stuff that could help train and evaluate military personnel for the roles that they have to play, right?
Yeah.
And that, arena is very interesting because proficiency matters so much in that world. I mean, what do I know? I'm far from someone who's qualified to talk about the military, but I will say, you and I, we go to school, you get an A or a C, it doesn't matter, you get on with it, right? But that world, you can't have a lot of C people because it can put people in harm's way. So that's one. Two, people are sort of coming at a very young age without maybe a ton of, a lot of people are coming in without sort of a ton of background and skill set. And every job that exists in the real world exists in the military, right? It's not just soldiers or whatever. So they have these important training objectives, and they spend a lot of time on technology. And I was seeing research papers showing insane results, right? You've never opened a computer before in your life, and now you're an expert IT person 6 months later or whatever. So that's not to say we're gonna recreate those kinds of results in the real world. I think people in the military have special attributes, either by virtue of whoever decides to sign up there, or the things you gain there, where it lends themselves to success in things like learning and training and all, where I think we're not lucky enough to have that kind of stuff as equally distributed in the real world. But I did see technology that was going to have potential for big impacts. So I was very curious. Okay,
so you got the kernel of this idea. You saw that it is possible under certain circumstances for extremely rapid skilling up of people with zero skills. So that's sort of this maybe thesis. So did you just go ahead and write some code
I wish. So I started investigating, started reaching out to people who I was aware that were sort of experts in academia and elsewhere and policy in this. And eventually someone's like, well, there's this professor at University of Michigan who does a lot of research and has done a lot of work on these kinds of things.
No, but when you say these kind of things, are we talking strictly security?
No, this is technologies, AI technologies that are applied to the context of assessment and training. And apparently in the 90s, while I was in college there studying electrical engineering, some electrical engineering professor had spun out a company that strictly works on this kind of research with the military. And so I reached out and connected and was able to be one of these entrepreneur in residence, fake title kind of things. And
well, there's a lot, it's such an interesting word.
It was kind of a joke to have a term entrepreneur in my title, given that I'm just this policy lawyer guy.
Yeah, but here
it was a chance to learn though.
I know, but here you are. You don't have a job. You're working on your own dime, so that's
No, they for they paid for. That was not a free gig, but there was.
There's the fungible aspect of EIR, which is
sometimes
it's paid, sometimes it's not paid.
They were it was a good thing, and it was a chance for me to learn about the things that they were doing, and to explore ideas of what could I do with those kinds of technologies.
So what ideas did you explore, and what conclusions did you come to?
So, I started investigating, well, what applications could in the real world, and this is not like novel area of thinking, right? There's lots of people working on this, but what could we do in the real world if I had the ability to like either build this kind of tech or license it or whatever, right? Started investigating different ideas that, community colleges, could people access these technologies directly and learn on their own? And really I arrived at the thought that I think the best chance for success for me was going to be products built for companies, sort of B2B facing. That's one. Two, so I started investigating like just what is it like to hire, train, onboard, all of that, and started investing in the cybersecurity space, just as sort of, the space is growing, it's high demand, there's opportunities there, and every like sort of chief security officer I interviewed, I mean, we were in New York, so I was working like, I guess, with a company in Michigan as the EIR, but I was based here, and I would touch base with them from time to time.
So you would call these cybersecurity chiefs? And
yeah, just show up to events, talk to them, whatever, right?
Somehow you gravitated towards cybersecurity.
Yeah.
And so what's the biggest problem that cybersecurity chiefs have? And by the way, let's be a little more specific. We're talking both in government and in the private sector.
Correct. Well, I think they have a whole set of problems, which I think everyone who follows, what's going on in the world knows. But in terms of people and talent, I think the biggest thing is, finding the people that they need. Now, I will caveat that a little bit, like these, talent shortage kind of things. I mean, look, if we like increase the pay by like 30%, I think we might close that talent gap real quick. But
no, what's your theory? Like, where are these people who, if you increase the pay, like where are they now, and where would they come from?
Well, I don't think it would happen overnight, depending on the depending on the field. But in general, everyone's my number one problem is talent, and I can't find people. Well, I think in a lot of cases, I don't know that necessarily applies to cybersecurity, but because I think that wages are fairly high in that space. But I think in a lot of spaces, it's not that you can't find the talent, it's you can't find the talent for what you want to pay, right? So that's a different question. But anyways, and like this is totally not a good thing for a startup that's B2B facing to say, so maybe. But anyways. I will listen to this in my edit, so. So I will say though that, clearly every chief security officer, it's hard to find people. It takes a long time to hire. You have to spend a lot of time on it. A lot of money goes into it. It's hard to figure out like who's good and who's not. If you get it wrong, there's a lot of costs.
So cybersecurity.
Diversity is a massive problem. It's like all dudes that look like me or you, right? So
cybersecurity chiefs these are the things that they're always complaining about that make their life difficult.
Yeah, and I think they're legitimate issues they're facing. So, these problems are not mind-blowing. I think anyone could guess at these. But the one consistent thing was, I want to find good people, and it's just draining on resources, the amount of time we spend on that.
So what did you do about it?
So, I sort of felt that that was, among the many, and then there was like, well, I've got to keep people trained and upskilled and all that. But I felt that consistent pain point at the hiring phase was something I could zero in on, just because like everybody to a T talked about it.
Yes.
Number two, in the way that, thinking about sort of talent and skills.
Thanks for the poop push.
Yeah. It's a New York skill, right?
It's a New York skill.
So, in the sequence of how we could think about talent from the perspective of people, right, is what do I need? I need to know like what it takes to be great at the thing I'm interested in, right? I need to know, like, do the skills I have lend themselves to that thing? What are my gaps? Where can I go to fill those gaps, right? There's a sequence of things. So the start of the sequence sort of speaks to the idea of like assessment, right? Like I need to know what it is that makes someone great at something. So in this case, a cybersecurity job, right? And then how can I like compare myself to that standard? And that's kind of also what employers need to do when they're hiring, right? They need to know like, well, here's what I'm looking for. How does this candidate compare to that? And so that's why I felt that was a reasonable starting point, and spoke to a real problem. And so what we've done is, in general for us, like the thing we're interested in as a starting point is like, we think that the way to find the most talented people is to look at what they can do and how they think, rather than just what their resumes say.
Exactly.
And so we've built a hands-on sort of simulation-based assessment for cybersecurity hiring, so that the hiring process at companies can be driven by those things that matter rather than resumes. Because if you have a technology that can sort of automate that evaluation, we can do that at the beginning of the process.
Okay, so let's give this a real story.
Yeah.
I'm a candidate.
Yeah.
Okay, I go to goteam5.com. What do I see?
So you don't, as a job candidate, you don't really go to GoTeam5, right? Let's say you apply for a job to company A, right?
Watch out with the mic.
Oh, sorry. You apply to a job to whatever company, however you connect with them, right? Once you put in your application, you get a link that takes you to our.
Got it. So a company is really going to want to put GoTeam5 into place to get a better evaluation of the candidate. So
think of like for software jobs, like a coding test, something like that. Not the same thing, but you apply for a job. Here, do this. Let me see what you're all about.
And what is it? Before I even ask that question, I just want to get a real walkthrough. So we established that. So then I, as a applicant, what do I see in this test? Okay.
So step one, you get a link, you click it, you're immediately in working on a virtual computer.
Yeah. Now, this is really interesting to me because this is your secret sauce. So is it like 100% real environment?
Yeah. So our product, one of our core product principles is that it should be as close to real life as possible, right? So in real life, there's not multiple choice questions. It's not a game where there's dead ends. They're just like, here's your work, go sort it out. And
so you literally get a real computer to like go into and evaluate security issues and vulnerabilities.
Correct.
So, for example, if your SSL certificate it has a little red warning sign on your browser, that's a potential security issue. Like these are just some of the scenarios that are real. Like it's not just like a fake pre-written sandbox. There's more flexibility in your system than because it's real.
That's correct. So, for example, let's say you're applying for a job as a security analyst, or some people call it incident response, right? You're a part of a team, you have to make sure your network is protected, and when there's a breach, you have to respond to it. So this person who's in the virtual computer, they're asked to, all right, inspect these machines, these computers on this network and see if there's any vulnerabilities. That is exactly the kind of thing you would do in the workplace, and you're looking for if there's malware or other issues. And so yes, the idea is like, let's give you realistic scenarios and work on it, and then we look at what you did and write up an evaluation report for our customer. And the idea is that is a body of information that they can use now to make a decision. So all these people applied for the job. instead of just looking at your resume, I'm like, oh, well, I'm not sure what the resume tells me, but like this person did this on this kind of exercise. That tells me something.
Exactly.
And I think that's, if we're to find the best talent, we need to look at what matters. And everybody who spent time in the real world knows that, like, what college you graduated from, who you know, even what previous jobs you had are not good, reliable indicators of talent. So let's just go to the tape. Let's look at what really matters.
Yes. I love the CNN, I love the ESPN's, Sports Center play callback, right? Let's go look at the tape.
Yeah.
That's what we need is Sports Center, but for cybersecurity.
I guess that's, sports is a good analogy, right? Because in the end, it just matters how you perform between the lines. It doesn't matter.
It does matter if you're a team player too, as opposed to just being a diva. You don't want a diva.
100%, right? So this is very important. Ultimately, anyone who's lived in the real world, those things are probably ultimately more important, right? Like, are you nice? Can you work on a team? Are you a leader?
That said,
are you a gamer? We're not evaluating those things though, because one, so like I said, it's a body of information that's an input into your bigger process of decision making, right? Yes. Companies are trying to create a culture, and that ultimately is probably the holistic thing of what matters. One, I don't think we can evaluate those non-sort of hard skills, for lack of a better term, well through technology.
And that's not your thesis, that's not your focus.
And so, yes, companies should really look at that. But now you can spend more time on that because Team 5 has taken, a bunch of stuff off your plate on the hard skills side. You can spend less time on that and more time on the other things that matter, right? That humans are really good at, like evaluating whether you fit into what I'm looking for. So one, I don't think we can do it through tech. Number two, I don't think we can do it without bias. And that's super important, because if we can't recognize our own biases, how could we possibly take it out of the tech, right? So the world is not ready for that thing yet. It's a research question, it's not something that's ready to be productized and implemented.
Next question. What are I realize you're in the pilot phase, right?
Yep. We're early.
Everyone knows that this is a startup.
Yep.
So what would be a sort of small step, a small dream for Go Team 5, in the next 6 months, in the next 3 months?
Yep.
As far as pilots go, like what are you looking for?
Our goal is to, have companies that are customers that would pilot with us. So that what that looks like is a limited pilot, pick one job opening, and we will use our technology to evaluate every candidate that applies for that job opening and give you a report. And we will work with you until that job is filled. And that is, we're looking for partners to do that with. I think our goal probably in the next 6 months is to have 5 to 10 pilot customers to work with us. And that would be the first step towards ever increasing sort of scale.
Now, why would a potential pilot go with Team 5? Give me some proven results. Mm-hmm. Sell us.
Well, the point of pilots is to show the value that we think we can deliver. But I will say one, companies are doing this one way or the other, right? So in the software developer side, you have like HackerRank, Codility. There's not an equivalent tool for cybersecurity hiring. So what are you doing right now as a company? You're either making up your own little something that's a pain in the ass to create, and you have candidates work on it, not scalable, not sort of consistently made, or you're using some existing platform and you're doing asking questions and asking people to write out stuff, right? So instead of that, we're giving you the ability to do the real thing, right? The thing that you want to do is see what they can actually do.
As far as cybersecurity.
And like I said, fundamentally, if you want to have the best talent, companies with the best talent wins. That's not just something we all know in our gut. It's, it plays out in real life, right? If you want to find the best talent, just ask yourself, like, what do you care? Are you a company that cares about pedigree? Or are you a company that cares about performance? I'm sure everyone would say, I care about performance. So then my question is, what are you doing about that? If you're starting with only a resume, I will say that we're offering something better to start with, which is the ability to look at performance.
Yes. So there's these cybersecurity skills out there. There is a pool, a massive pool of talent that's just under recognized, and furthermore, Go Team 5 maybe makes the process more efficient, and just like you said, so that you can spend less time hiring and more time making your company successful and making your company the way your company wants to be.
Right, and you just asked, like, in terms of, well, why this, right? It's because the thing that hiring is hard. We all know that, right? The thing that makes hiring hard is all of the things that matter for talent are sort of like unobservable, right? You care about how someone thinks, right? That's not easy to figure out. That's why we use resumes and all that. They're just like shortcuts that are not very good.
Yeah.
But it's because at some point in your process, you have your actual engineers talk to the candidate. What are you doing? You're trying to figure out how that candidate thinks, right? You don't have time to ask them 5,000 questions about all the things that can come up in reality. So you ask them 3 questions, and then you make some kind of judgment about how they think, because your experts, your best engineers, are equipped to make that kind of judgment, right? But it happens way too late in the process. You've already, your filtering process early on has overrated people and underrated people because you've only looked at resumes, right?
Yes.
So instead of it doing at this point, we're offering the ability to flip that and do it at the beginning. So now your candidate pool are people who can actually do the things you want them to do. And through our evaluation, you have some sense of how they're thinking about this work. And now you can implement the rest of your process, start talking about all the other things that matter. Like you said, communication, teamwork, leadership, are you a gamer? All this stuff, attitude, right? And then, before you decide who's coming for a callback, where you spend a lot of time with people, we can do something more involved as an exercise. So now you're only spending time with the people that you think are up to the task.
So unless you think I missed something.
That's all of it.
Unless you think I missed something, I have a final question for you.
Yes.
Do you feel like I missed something super important to Go Team 5?
No.
Okay.
You have not. That's your final question?
No.
Oh, okay.
That would be hard.
No, you are a very thorough interviewer.
I'd love to,
Isaac Chotner, that's the best interviewer I see out there in the world. You're as good as him.
I'd love to just have, 3 hours of people's time to just, Larry King you.
Yeah, but I concede I'm sort of blah, 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 so I apologize for that.
Well, that's part of the practice of becoming a CEO is really, you only recognizing that you only have an elevator pitch.
Yeah, I've got to learn how to shut the fuck up. I got that.
And just it's not shut the fuck. It's just
it's a problem.
It's just knowing the right time and the right place.
Yeah.
And knowing when you need to be in sales mode versus other mode. So anyway. The final question of the show is one that I ask every entrepreneur that comes on the show, and I think it's the most important question. Sure, we've talked about your business, and we sort of know your general game plan and your general, thoughts, and that you have a thesis that cybersecurity chiefs have a difficult time hiring, and you feel you have identified a niche in the market that's unfilled, and you're taking your stab at it with a product that is pretty cool from a technical perspective. But we know that. But I think the most important question on this show is the one that I ask to everybody, because it's a different question than I've really asked up until this point, which is, Tushar, how do you think you have grown as an entrepreneur?
Oh, I mean, so, with a kind of law, policy, government, that kind of background, I mean, everything is new. Every step is like a whole set of learning, and then try stuff, fail, learn more. So learning like a whole new set of things, like knowledge, skills, whatever. So that's one. Number two, super humbling. Definitely the hardest thing I've ever worked on. And again, we're at the beginning, so we haven't figured anything out, right? That's number two. Number three, I think, there's this really real aspect to it, because we're at this first step of all right, pilots. The first time we have to see is someone willing to pay for this. And I've never really had to work on something that real.
Yes.
Right? Most other jobs, it's all right, you get an assignment,
there already are clients.
Yeah, but it's either you're gonna do a good job on that assignment or not. That's up to you, but you kind of know what you have to do. And there's not this the success is getting it done and giving it to somebody. Whereas here it's this whole next level of what it means to get it done is that someone else has to take action based on what you've done. So it's, that is a whole,
level of responsibility that you've maybe never had.
Not just, but just challenge. I guess people like to use the term skin in the game. So it's, unique. It's a unique experience for someone with my background to have that. And a lot of it's either I'm gonna, step up and sort it out, or I won't. But there will be no reason, if we fail, it'll be because I didn't figure it out, you know? So that is a whole new feeling.
Indeed.
I will say when people talk about the pain, I sort of now am, can feel that a little bit in my gut.
Well, I think people glamorize entrepreneurship, and definitely I am part of that problem, right? By having this show, right? I am sort of glamorizing it, but I'm also trying to say that people that are entrepreneurs, you are not playing it safe. Just because there's a million other entrepreneurs out there doesn't mean you or I will be successful. This show could go end tomorrow, and I might just have to get some job and not have the freedom to be able to do this show anymore.
Totally correct. I will say, a little bit of perspective. I mean, my wife's a doctor, so I have a little bit of ability to take some chances. And I think most entrepreneurs, what you really got to respect is that people are just this is it. This is success or failure overall. Now, I do feel that because failure would still be failure here, but so a little bit of perspective for me, it would be silly for me not to sort of concede that. But yes, I think that, but there's another side. It is fine, nothing's gonna be as fun as working in the White House, but it's fun, it's a rush. It is this challenge and trying to sort things out. It's definitely fun, but not fun in the like you said, the glamorous thing. Nothing glamorous. We are a broke startup trying to get to a different place, So
I think that's a great position to be in because you're lean, mean, and hungry.
Yeah. Yeah.
And on that note, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, man. Thanks for being interested in what we're doing. It's a very cool thing. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Tushar.
Yeah.